What happens when the resident bully at Willow Creek High decides to make a spectacle of a quiet girl just for kicks? He had no earthly idea she was a force of nature, honed by years on the mat. What unfolded next left the entire school community grappling with a silence far louder than any shout. Ever feel like you wake up expecting just another ordinary day? That was Maya Jensen. She was 16, observant as a hawk, and preferred the company of books to loud crowds. She was the kind of person who'd hold a door open even if no one noticed, quietly extending kindness for its own sake. That morning she was navigating the bustling courtyard of Willow Creek, arms full of history textbooks. She'd volunteered to help her teacher move to the library. Sleeves pushed up, eyes focused on keeping the dusty hardbacks from tumbling. No fanfare, no applause, just helping. But Willow Creek, much like many places, had a way of overlooking quiet goodness, especially when it belonged to someone who looked like Maya. And there, leaning against the brick wall like he owned the sunshine, stood Trevor Sterling, the mayor's son, all privilege and puffed up chest, with a cocky smirk that told everyone he'd never heard the word no in his privileged life. Not from teachers, not from anyone who mattered, and certainly not from his influential father. Maya didn't even see him at first, lost in the careful balance of heavy books. But Trevor saw her. In his limited world, her calm focus, her quiet grace, and the color of her skin weren't just who she was. They were a challenge, and Trevor Sterling did not like being challenged. He swaggered over without a word of warning and simply swiped at the box of books, as if playing a casual, cruel game. Books crashed onto the concrete spines, bending pages fluttering like startled birds. Maya knelt down at her movements, deliberate and unhurried, and began gathering them. That's when the snickers started. Trevor's usual hangers-on, a handful of loud boys who trailed him like pilot fish following a shark, found it hilarious. "Think you're smart, huh?" "Miss Bookworm," Trevor sneered, standing over her, dripping with false authority, carrying knowledge like you actually get it. Maya didn't flinch, didn't argue. She just carefully picked up a book, treating it with a reverence that seemed to irritate him more than any outburst could have. That silence, that quiet composure, it got under his skin like grit in a wound. He flicked a glance at his cronies, a silent signal before Maya could even fully stand. One of them yanked a belt from his backpack. Why he had it wasn't clear, but in that moment it became a tool of petty tyranny. Another grabbed her shoulders. It happened fast, too fast. Suddenly she was pressed against the cold, unforgiving metal of the flagpole. Arms twisted behind her, the belt cinched tight. They tied her there like some kind of bizarre, cruel exhibit. And people laughed. Not everyone, thankfully, but enough. Phones appeared recording the spectacle. Some folks shook their heads and quickly walked away, finding anywhere else more important than witnessing someone's dignity being stripped away. Maya stood bound, not screaming, not crying. Her gaze was fixed, not on Trevor, not on his crew, not even on the recording phones, but somewhere beyond, something higher. It was as if she were calculating the immense weight a young black girl's pride could bear before the world tried to snap it in two. But inside, beneath the quiet exterior, a fire raged. It wasn't fear. It was a profound, quiet shame for them, for thinking this was funny. They had no idea. They didn't know about the countless hours of training, the competitions, the times she deliberately held back her fists out of discipline, not weakness. They didn't know about the carefully folded black belt resting in a drawer at home while she stood there bound, choosing not to unleash her power. Not yet. What happened next began to shift the air. Ms. Albright, her history teacher, rounded the corner, clipboard in hand, expecting to see Maya heading towards the library. She froze. Stunned, Maya was tied to the flagpole, a forgotten prop. Her books lay scattered, her face a mask of forced calm, her dignity hanging in the tense air like smoke after a small contained fire. For a brief, agonizing second, even Ms. Albright stood still. Then came a sharp cry. "Untie her! Right now!" Every head in the courtyard snapped around. The laughter died instantly. But Trevor, he barely reacted. He just smirked and gave a dismissive shrug. "She said she liked it like that," said it made her feel special. A stunned silence fell. Then the crowd parted as Mr. Harrison, the assistant principal, burst out of the building, face flushed with panic. He fumbled with the belt, finally freeing Maya. Her knees were stiff, her arms trembled, but not from fear. It was the vibration of a rage so profound it was almost silent. "Who did this?" Mr. Harrison demanded, scanning the faces. "Wasn't anyone—" one of Trevor's crew. Mumbled eyes glued to his phone. "She tied herself, like a trend or something." Ms. Albright opened her mouth to protest, but a voice beat her to it. Small, shaky from the edge of the dispersing crowd. "I have video," shouted Chloe, a freshman girl clutching her phone like a lifeline. Another silence deeper this time. Trevor turned his head slowly, deliberately. The smirk vanished. His eyes locked onto Chloe, and that's when genuine fear flickered across her face. "You sure about that?" he muttered, walking past her. Not loud, not overtly threatening, just cold and cutting. Chloe didn't say another word. The crowd melted away like mist. Phones vanished. Whispers spread like wildfire. But when it came time for someone to truly stand up, most looked away. In the office, Maya sat across from 3 adults who wore expressions of carefully rehearsed fairness. Mrs. Albright stood behind her, hands fisted tight. "We're not saying it's your fault," Principal Davies began, his voice dripping with administrative diplomacy. "But some students felt you might have been provoking attention." Maya stared at the wall, still vibrating with suppressed emotion. Provoking attention. She was carrying books. And now she was being blamed for how others reacted to her quiet presence, her stillness, her skin. In that moment, she learned a hard truth. Silence, when it comes from someone like her, could be twisted into anything. A challenge, an invitation, a threat, and the people in power seemed more interested in avoiding bad press than pursuing justice. This was the crucible, the turning point. Maya didn't go straight home that day. No family dinner, no quiet bus ride, no dropping her backpack by the door. She went directly to the one place where pain wasn't just understood, it was transformed. The dojo. The dojo was humble. Concrete floors, walls lined with faded trophies. The air smelled of sweat, worn leather, and something far more potent than any bureaucratic apology. Respect Coach Tanaka stood by the heavy bag, hands on his hips, decades of experience carved into his face, built like a sturdy oak. He didn't waste words or offer empty comfort. He believed in earned control, and he read Maya's energy the moment she stepped onto the mat. "You okay?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She just stepped onto the mat, tightened her belt with a deliberate movement, as if it held her together, and squared up to the bag. The first punch landed, then the second. By the 5th, the bag began to swing. By the 10th, she wasn't thinking about the flagpole, the belt, the laughter, or the adults who'd implied she contributed to her own humiliation. By the 20th, all she felt was the punishing rhythm of her fists beating back every silent scream trapped in her chest. Coach Tanaka didn't stop her. He didn't ask again. He just watched like a man who had seen too many young souls try to contain a storm and end up drowning in it. Finally, when her knuckles were raw beneath the wraps and the bag had stopped its violent dance, he spoke. "Strength ain't always the answer, Maya." Maya stood breathing heavily, shoulders trembling not from exertion, but from the fire smoldering just beneath her skin. "I know," she said quietly, "but what if silence is worse?" That hit him differently. Coach Tanaka didn't argue, didn't offer platitudes, he just nodded. Once walked to a shelf and pulled down an old chest protector, worn and stained from years of hard lessons. He handed it to her like it was armor. "Then train like your life depends on it," he said, "because sometimes it does." And that was it. No lectures, no pity, just the space she needed to fight what the world had thrown onto her shoulders. Maya stayed long after the sun dipped below the horizon. The dojo windows fogged over. Her sweat hit the floor like exclamation points. Her breathing became a rhythm. Every strike was a sentence, every block a declaration. She was reclaiming her voice through every motion, every ache, every bruise. She didn't need to cry. Her tears had already learned how to fight. They called it a disciplinary hearing, but Maya knew exactly what it was, a performance. A carefully orchestrated formality so the school could appear to be doing something while sweeping the truth under the rug. She walked into the administrative conference room like she was entering enemy territory. A long, glossy table, polished floors, the kind of room where important voices echoed, but the truth rarely landed. The flag in the corner stood stiffly, as if trying to remain detached. Maya sat across from Trevor Sterling. The reason they were all there, though no one in that room would name it. Plainly, Trevor lounged in his leather chair, hands laced behind his neck, tapping a foot against the table leg. Confidence dripped off him like cheap cologne. He wasn't nervous. He knew the game, and he knew it was rigged in his favor. Principal Davies sat at the head of the table, flanked by assistant principals and a school board representative who looked like she hadn't seen the inside of a classroom in decades. All of them wore expressions that screamed neutrality, even as their minds seemed already made up. Let's keep this productive. Davies began using that tone people adopt when they think the right inflection can erase injustice. We just want to hear both sides and reach a peaceful understanding. Maya didn't respond. She didn't trust her voice, not because it was weak, but because she knew they would twist it the second she used it. So she brought the one thing they couldn't easily ignore: a witness. Chloe, the freshman girl who'd shown courage in the courtyard, sat beside her, clutching her phone like a lifeline. She was visibly nervous, fidgeting. But Maya believed in her. Believed she would do the right thing until she didn't. When Davies turned to her and asked, "Can you tell us what you saw?" Chloe blinked, hesitated, and then folded like a cheap chair. "I'm not really sure how it started," she mumbled, eyes down. "I think maybe it was just a prank. It looked like they were just messing around." Maya felt the air punch out of her lungs. Trevor smirked openly. He leaned forward casually. "It was a joke," he said, light and dismissive. She didn't say anything, didn't try to get away. "I mean, come on, if someone's uncomfortable, they speak up, right?" He glanced pointedly at Maya as he said this. He was sharp in his cruelty, planting seeds of doubt in minds already fertile ground for believing him. Because silence from a black girl could be made to mean anything. And these were people more afraid of conflict than injustice. The room fell quiet. The kind of quiet that means decisions are being made, not questions asked. Principal Davies broke it. "Well, it seems that there's been some misunderstanding. No serious harm was done, and if intent is unclear..." He adjusted his glasses, folding his hands. "Then we'll consider the matter settled." Settled as if it were a parking dispute. Maya didn't say a word, didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Because the moment she walked into that room, they had already chosen comfort over truth. She stood slowly adjusting her sleeves with a quiet dignity that felt like armor, not protecting her from pain, but keeping it from spilling out in front of people who hadn't earned the right to see it. Trevor followed a few steps behind as they exited, still wearing that untouchable smile. Just before she turned a corner out of earshot, he leaned in. "See," he whispered, as if sharing a private joke. "Told you all you're good for is standing still, bound up quiet, just like before." Maya didn't flinch, didn't stop walking. But inside a wire snapped. It wasn't rage, not vengeance. It was perfect clarity. That was the last time she would allow her silence to be used as permission. Trevor wasn't just a boy with a belt and a smirk. He was a symbol of a world that expected people like her to be quiet, polite, and invisible just to keep others comfortable. He didn't know it yet, but the fuse he thought he'd extinguished was just beginning to burn. And the girl he mocked at that flagpole wasn't going to stay tied up. Not in this story, not ever again. A couple of days later, during the lunch period, the sun was high, the air thick with heat, and the lingering tension of a week nobody seemed ready to talk about. Maya stood in the middle of the courtyard, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, but no music playing. She wasn't hiding, wasn't seeking attention either, just existing, breathing. And in a place like Willow Creek sometimes that was enough to provoke someone like Trevor Sterling. He strode up with the same swagger he'd always worn, like an inherited mantle. No belt this time, just bare hands, and the same grin that said he'd never been told no. By teachers, by girls, by life itself. Round 2, he smirked, holding his arms out slightly, a mock offer of an embrace made of bad intentions. Maya didn't answer, didn't blink. That seemed to unnerve him. He stepped closer, too close, and reached out as if to shove her again, as if nothing had changed, as if she was still tied to that pole in his mind. But this time she moved fast. Before his hand reached her shoulder, her fingers clamped around his wrist like a steel trap. No yelling, no hesitation, just precision, controlled, deliberate power. "What the?" He started trying to pull back, but she held firm. Instead, she twisted, pivoting on her heel, drawing his arm across her body, and in one clean, fluid motion, brought him down hard onto his knees. The sharp crack of his kneecaps hitting the concrete echoed across the courtyard. "Let go," Trevor yelped, his voice high and cracking. "You're hurting me." Maya leaned down slightly, her voice calm, a whisper carried by distant thunder. "I'm only getting started." Phones came out again, but this time no one laughed. No one intervened. They were recording in stunned silence, eyes wide, watching Trevor, the self-proclaimed king of the courtyard, squirm at the feet of the girl he had mocked. He tried to scramble up, arm limp at his side. Maya released him, giving him the choice. And that was his second mistake. He lunged, sloppy, desperate, all pride, no plan. Maya pivoted again, her foot sweeping low, just enough. Trevor's legs flew out from under him, as if a rug had been yanked away. He hit the pavement face first, palms slapping down reflexively. It didn't work. His white jersey ripped across the back, his knee scraped open, his inflated pride shattered in full public view. And Maya. Maya stood over him, still, not angry, not wild, just rooted like a tree that had finally decided. It was done, bending in the storm. She didn't raise her voice, didn't pose for the cameras. She wasn't performing, she was reclaiming her space. Not above him, not below, just equal in a world that tried so hard to make her feel anything but. And the most powerful thing of all, she simply walked away. No dramatic exit, no final threat, just that same quiet presence, the one that once made her seem invisible, now holding the entire courtyard in stunned, silent awe. Within hours, the video had exploded online, millions of views and climbing. The caption was simple, devastating: "Bully ties black girl to pole. She's a black belt. Watch this." No filters, no background music, no fancy edits, just raw footage of a high school courtyard turned proving ground where the boy who ruled through intimidation got brought low in front of everyone. Maya didn't even know the video had been posted. She hadn't done it. Someone else had. Someone who decided that silence wasn't going to be the final word this time. And the internet listened, hashtags trended. Commentators dissected every frame. Social media was ablaze with replays of Trevor's face mid-fall. Then came the media circus. Local news vans parked outside Willow Creek High like they were covering a major disaster. Reporters swarmed the main office, microphones thrust at bewildered students, cameras scanning every inch of the school grounds like detectives searching for the truth the administration had tried to bury. And the administration they spiraled. Principal Davies, the one who had lectured about understanding both sides, was now holed up in his office, muttering "no comment" into voicemails. Teachers who had looked the other way suddenly became camera shy. And students, they weren't whispering anymore. They were talking, loudly, about what they'd seen, what they'd heard about how long things like this had gone on. Unnoticed, and how this time the world just happened to be watching. But the real seismic shift occurred when Maya's parents arrived. Not to cause a scene or shout, they arrived with documentation, security footage, witness statements, screenshots, and a very calm, very focused civil rights attorney who had handled cases like this before. They didn't ask for permission. They filed a formal complaint and put the district on notice. They weren't backing down. Meanwhile, Trevor Sterling's world began to crumble. His father, Mayor Sterling, held a press conference, standing stiffly in front of the city. Seal voice carefully modulated. We reject this false narrative circulating online. He declared my son was the victim of a violent, unprovoked attack, but it didn't work. Not this time, because the same kid who laughed while tying a girl to a pole was now being replayed frame by frame, screaming on the ground, begging to be let go. And when that footage cut to his tear-streaked face, when the public saw the mayor's son crying, while his father tried to paint him as the one needing protection, the backlash was overwhelming. Headlines flipped. Comment sections erupted. The narrative changed, and for the first time it changed in Maya's favor. She wasn't being asked to explain herself anymore. She wasn't sitting in a sterile room defending her right to exist quietly. That seat now belonged to them, the adults, the school, the system that had failed her. And Trevor. Trevor wasn't strutting anymore. He was trying to disappear. This time the school board meeting wasn't held behind closed doors. There was no polite phrasing, no coffee-stained folders full of excuses. This wasn't about damage control, it was about consequences. The board reconvened, but they weren't in charge now. Seated front and center were representatives from the county prosecutor's office and the state education inspector. Both sent in after the governor's office took notice. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but every word spoken would ripple far beyond those walls. The evidence was stacked undeniable. The video witness statements, timestamps, the documented threats, all laid out like pieces on a chessboard. And for the first time, the board didn't belong to the powerful M's. Albright Maya's history teacher spoke first. Calm, clear, without hesitation. She described exactly what she had seen, a young girl bound to a pole, while others laughed. Mr. Harrison, the assistant principal, who had initially seemed unsure, suddenly remembered details with startling clarity. He spoke of Maya's quiet tremor of his own sense that something was deeply wrong, a bit late for instincts perhaps, but at least he was speaking the truth now. Then came the most unexpected voice. Chloe, the freshman girl. She took the stand again, but this time fire simmered beneath her tremor. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. She told them about the pressure, the whispers, the explicit threats from Trevor and his crew after she had first spoken up. She even showed the messages, irrefutable proof they had tried to silence her. That tipped the scales. You could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't just about one girl in a video anymore. This was about a culture of fear, about power protecting itself, and it broke wide open. The school board, which had treated Maya's pain as an inconvenience, had nowhere left to hide. They didn't just suspend Trevor Sterling. They removed him from all school activities, barred him from campus, and issued a statement explicitly distancing the district from his behavior. Translation, they finally admitted what he did, and they didn't stop there. The school administrator, who had tried to bury the whole thing, the one who suggested Maya might have provoked attention, was gone, terminated. Effective immediately. The silence they had once used as a shield had become too deafening to ignore. And sitting there in the front row, silent, composed, and still, as a mountain was Maya. She wore a simple white button-down shirt. No dramatic flair, no grand gesture, but beneath the fabric, folded neatly, was her black belt. Not for show, not for vengeance, but as a reminder to herself, and perhaps to them, that she had power long before they saw it. And now the truth was finally breathing freely in that room. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't gasping for air. It stood tall, just like her. Weeks later, the echoes hadn't faded. They had just changed shape. The video still circulated, still being shared, remixed, analyzed. But Maya had moved on to something that couldn't be captured in a clip. Regularly, the old gym at Willow Creek High filled with sound. The rhythmic thud of bare feet on waxed wood, the sharp hiss of breath drawn through grit, the steady cadence of resolve. Maya stood at the front of the room, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, a whistle she never used, hanging loosely from her neck. Around her were a dozen or so girls, freshmen, sophomores even. One senior who used to walk right past her in the halls, but now arrived early just to help roll out the mats. Maya didn't talk much. She didn't need to. Her presence did the talking. She showed them how to ground their feet, how to breathe when pressure built, how to move through fear instead of away from it. And every now and then, in a quiet pause between drills, she would say something simple, unforgettable. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she'd say, her voice calm but carrying. "But you do have to know when someone's crossed a line and be ready." They listened, not because her voice was loud, but because it meant something. They knew what she had endured. They had seen it. The courtyard, the flagpole, the silence, the storm. And now they were watching something rarer, what comes after survival. As for Trevor Sterling, he was gone, whisked away to some expensive, exclusive academy where consequences came with soft-gloved explanations. His name still surfaced in online gossip, but his reign at Willow Creek was over. His father, the mayor, who had stood behind microphones defending a version of events that never happened, quietly resigned, permanently. No public statement, no farewell tour, just a brief headline and then a blank space where his power used to be. But Maya didn't follow that part of the story. She wasn't scrolling through feeds. She didn't need reminders. People asked her if she'd watched the video again, the one that changed everything. She always shook her head. "I was there," she said once. That was enough. Coach Tanaka watched her sometimes from the sidelines. During her class, arms crossed his eyes, holding something deeper than pride. One day, after the girls had finished wiping sweat from their faces, he came over. "You still mad?" Maya looked at him, then past him, as if seeing something vast and unfolding. "No," she said softly. "I just finally understand what silence can become, and what I can become too." She didn't need applause or headlines or tidy closure. She had a black belt tucked under a plain hoodie, a voice that no longer needed anyone's permission to resonate, and a room full of girls who now knew exactly what true power looked like. Not loud, not angry, just ready. Because her belt, though hidden from view, shone brighter than any trophy in that building. It was earned, and now it was being passed on.